light says go.
Sports and entertainment. This is The Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
Welcome everyone. Not just one, but the one guy sitting right beside me. But we're going to welcome everybody to the show. It's Rudy Reyes on The Rude Dog Show. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for spending at least 30 minutes with me, maybe a little bit more, depending on how much in the weeds we're going to get over the mechanic of Nate McMillan.
Welcome to the epicenter of sports
I got to play
and
the opener again because it just sounds so good. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to go with that. But we are going to go with my buddy here who hasn't been on the show in, man, it's been a minute. Bryce Lewis, who writes for Sports Illustrated and covers the Atlanta Hawks. Interestingly enough, today was the mechanic of Nate McMillan. And when I say the mechanic, I mean he was really like seriously deteriorating type of dive. We're going to jump into that. We're going to talk about Russell Westbrook. Brooke. Gosh, I can't get that out of my head no matter what I do. No matter how I slice it, Bryce, not once but twice, because it's always nice. I don't eat rice. But I know that Westbrook is a guy who's going to have to show up in now a Clippers uniform in the same arena he played in, but for the Lakers. But we're going to jump off first. We're going to talk about this Nate McMillan firing about 50 minutes ago, reporting out of Atlanta that Nate McMillan, who for all intents and purposes and for what he is worth, for what he has brought to this Atlanta franchise, some can say, okay, great, you helped us out. It was good. It was fine. It was wonderful. But fans are more about what can you do for me now? What have you not done for me before? Because they don't remember that. And fans have that recollection, right? They think about last year. Well, last year, it was all right. We didn't get there. We kind of missed a little bit. Tell me about what happened. Was it a deterioration in the locker room? Did Trae Young melt down himself? How did this transpire? What led the Atlanta Hawks to believe that this was the right move to make right after All-Star? And by the way, yes, he is the first coach to be fired after an All-Star game.
Yeah, and you just made an interesting tidbit there. First coach to be fired after All-Star game. But, Rudy, it's kind of a multitude of things. It's not just one thing. I feel like, one thing that Nate has been known for is that he is known as an old school coach. He is known as he's back at that time. And now the NBA has dramatically changed. He's even made a comment about it's not like it was when he played. It's different. And so that could immediately be maybe some communication between the players and him wasn't always ideal. You heard rumblings of some disconnect between him and Trae. Then there was questions about his connection to the rest of the team as well. Did people connect with him right before All-Star break? Former athletic reporter for the Atlanta Hawks, Chris Kirshner, came on a Hawks Spaces and kind of made some interesting comments, kind of hinting that, the team doesn't really buy into him while he was here. And that was last year. So, he has been extremely inconsistent. You've seen the numbers will have the same amount of points. The teams we played have had the same amount of points. We have the same record in both conferences. Just the definition of in the middle. And that's why I think, the story of the season was inconsistency for this team. It's been the thing that has been inconsistent since last year. And I think it just came to a head. This front office feels like, listen, we have a superstar. We acquired a star. We have very young players that are really talented. You got AJ, you got Jalen, Bogey's a good shooter, you got Capella. You're like, we have a lot of talent on this team, but we're one game under 500, and we're in the 8th spot to play in. Y'all were in the play-in last year without DeJounte Murray. You added DeJounte and AJ, and you're in the exact same place. That means something's not working. And so usually these situations, you have to look at the head guy because, we've seen some coaches just don't get the most out of their players.
Sure.
And I think this was an example of that. I just think this team never truly hit their stride under Nate since the Eastern Conference Finals run. Because people forget during that run as well. Remember, when Nate took over, he still had Lloyd Pierce's staff and Lloyd Pierce's playbook. Lloyd Pierce has been known as an X's and O's player development guy. And so when the next offseason came, put his offense in, brought his people in. And now I'm seeing people who would cover the NBA but don't watch the Hawks, but cover the NBA, play their team or whoever they're covering, tweeting out the Hawks don't have a system. They're just playing. Like, if you watch this team, it's like, what am I watching? It's almost like they're going out there and they're just like, what do we got to do today? And I think all that, I think people just like to Nate. Like, a lot of Hawks fans are actually very excited about this because they feel like he has held this team back. And there's a multitude of examples I could get into, but there's a lot of things that have happened that's just like, it's hard not to look at him as a main culprit in why this happened. Now, there's other things. Trust me, this is not all on him. Players need to do better. There's so many other things that make a team in a season. But I think a lot of people feel like David Mill was that number one reason.
Brought to you today by Today's California, Today's Canada, if you're into that kind of thing. And of course, you can find me on the Rude Dog Show everywhere. This is live on Twitter, live on LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. We are live on it. Joined by a constituent of mine. I was wondering where you were looking. I was actually looking for you at Media Week out in Tucson. Bryce Lewis joins me covering the Atlanta Hawks. Going back to your point, in regards to Nate McMillan, I recognize that you have to have a little old school flavor. I understand that mentality, attitude, direction. But somehow the players weren't necessarily buying into it. And I think that has a lot to do with the youth and how they've maybe in this set of situations have kind of moved on and creating their own segue of saying, you know what, this is where we're at, but we don't want to be here year after year after year after year. We want to be over here. We want to have a better record, better fluency, better transition buckets. We need to be firing on all cylinders. We got to get our defense up. There's a lot of alterations we need to make. But how do we do that? Well, they do that, and obviously had done that, firing Nate McMillan. Now, again, I give him all due respect when he played and was who he was as a player. But in today's NBA, and I hate to say today's NBA, but it's also today's sports landscape, NFL, Major League Baseball, rules change, things of that nature. I won't get into the weeds and all of that, but I will say this. Nate McMillan hasn't exactly had a stellar record. And I'm not here to whack him or, pull a good fellas term out of my hat, but he hasn't done very well. 97, he was he just didn't do very well as a coach with the Thunder. And it really makes you wonder where his mind is at. And I look at him, I think to myself, man, he needs to do something else. Maybe retire. He was born in 1964. He played through the glory years of the 1970s, played in the 1980s. And maybe there needs to be a changing of the guards. And I think the organization had felt a reason beyond a shadow of a doubt that this needed to be that type of change. They needed to do something drastic. Because they did this, they're looking at Dan Snyder. Does he fit the mold? Is he going to, if for some reason they do acquire Dan Snyder as the next head coach, what does Dan Snyder have working for him? But what more importantly, does he have as far as an uphill battle is concerned to get this Hawks team back into contention?
I think the thing about it with Snyder is when he was in Utah, he had Mitchell, he had Gobert, that Utah team. Most people would probably say he maximized that team. Like what they were is that he got literally the most out of them he could. And that's why he was viewed as a very highly touted coach in the league. Because if people see you're maximizing a team and players and they're buying in, then that's going to give you high regards. Now, towards the end, how head coaching 10 years ago, eventually players start to kind of dribble off a little bit. Then eventually things need to go their separate ways. And then I think that's what happened. But I think if they're able to get him, that would be ideal. Because there are multiple things they want. First, player development. Donovan, guys like that developed under, Quinn. Nate got himself in trouble because he said this last year. He said it again this year. He said, we're not developing. Your core players are 23, 22, and 24. They're not polished. They're not developed fully. You can't say that. That was something that was really big. That was is he just saying that developing is not what he does? Because maybe he feels like that's an assistant coach thing. He ain't got nothing to do with that. But then you could go into, why AJ getting a lot of minutes and Jalen getting a lot of minutes, because I know that's been an issue. And the Quinn, I think he'll go in, he'll develop guys. The second thing they want is accountability. He did hold Donovan Mitchell accountable. He did hold Rudy Gobert accountable. He did hold other guys accountable. Like the Utah team was probably one of the more disciplined teams in the league during his time there. They weren't known as a team that just did whatever. They pretty much were, committed to what they were supposed to do on a night in and night out basis. And so I think, if he comes to the Hawks, I expect him to be able to do the same thing. I think the interesting thing is he's been out the game for a second. So, I don't know what he's learned, what he's seen, what mistakes he maybe feel like he did in Utah that he could bring to the Hawks, and everything. But the unique thing about this entire situation, Rudy, is just the Hawks have just gone through a whole rescale of their front office and coaching mid-season. Usually you might make a firing here and then wait till the offseason. They've completely reconfigured the front office. And then you're firing your head coach. Now you're already starting the search, and we still have 23 games left in the year for the Hawks. There's a lot going on, and the season's not even over. So, if they're able to get him, I think it'll be a good pickup. But, like other guys, like Charles Lee from Milwaukee, a guy who's a rising assistant coach that a lot of people like, or even Kenny Atkinson. We saw what he did with the Brooklyn Nets before KD got there. KD and Kyrie didn't buy into him, but the guys the previous year bought in, and you saw what they looked like. And I think that's what they want. They want player development because they know they have young guys, and they want a coach who will make these players take accountability so they can get the most out of them night after night.
One thing that I'm looking for the Atlanta Hawks to do is dive into that element of player development, because you can't have guys who are young who are not actually developing game by game, play by play, transition buckets, getting inside on a defender, preventing them from shooting at will wherever they want to on the court, whether it's perimeter or from the three, and really contest before they get to the iron. And if they can do that, if they have the capabilities of getting back into contention, playing the ball that fundamentally they will need to play, because the clock's running out and time is not on their side at all. I'm more concerned as to how that player development will transition out of this season and what it'll look like next season. That's what I'm looking forward to that. I'm not saying that the Hawks are out of it by any means. I'm not saying that, Quinn's not going to be able to come in and turn this thing around. Anything's possible. But for the future of the franchise, for the longevity and the long-term answers need to be within the organization and ownership to say, this is what we need to work on. This is what we need to put in place. And I recognize, coaches come in, they go out, they bring in their new guys, and then let the other ones go. It happens all the time, all across sports. NFL is notorious for that, more so than the NBA in regards to coach turnover or lack thereof. Mm-hmm. Head coaches are now offensive coordinators. Some head coaches in the NBA end up being assistant coaches. I believe that the Hawks have a way to go. And again, I'm not saying that they're out of it completely, but because time is not on their side, they're going to find themselves they're on a short leash, and they did it to themselves ultimately.
Yeah,
but they had to let Nate.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, they had to let Nate go. I mean, the bottom line is that was it the timing that's always going to be questioned? Well, of course, it's always going to be questioned by fans and players, but I think more by fans than players. And I think fans are expecting more out of this team. We see in the All-Star game in Utah, which I don't think it had ever been in Utah. I think this is the first year it's ever been in Utah. And if it was a long, long, long time ago before I was born. But that's pretty long ago. But anyway, I didn't really care for the All-Star game, to be quite honest with you. You had injuries. LeBron went out. Both captains went down with the ship, so to speak. And I don't know. It wasn't very entertaining. The slam dunk contest didn't exactly do a whole lot for me. There were guys doing the very same thing the following year as maybe their predecessors had done the year before that. And then here comes Nate McClung. Who? What? McClung? Isn't that what you find in static when you pull your stuff out of the dryer? I mean, everything's on a clung status. what did he do that was so dynamic? Now, I watched it from end to end. I was rooting for the guy. And by the way, the first guy from a G League to ever be drafted and play in a 3-point contest or slam dunk contest rather, where he just put everybody else on notice. What are your thoughts about his play and what a pickup?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm always saying, listen, there are so many guys just in the world who can dunk. Dunking is his own individual skill. Like we've seen guys who are not the most skilled players, but like they can dunk. And I feel like Mac has always been athletic. He's always been known for his explosiveness, even coming out of college. It's just he doesn't have, I guess, a lot of other things that get him consistently on an NBA main roster. But and last year you even saw it. I think somebody else from the G League was in the slam dunk competition last year, I believe. So, because a lot of the big names aren't doing it anymore. And then that goes into the whole reason why the All-Star Weekend hasn't been as glorious and popular as it been, obviously, years ago. But, I mean, listen, I'm happy for the guy. I mean, he had to make a statement. Shaq told him, hey, don't miss any dunks. And he didn't miss any dunks. So, he had the support. And now to see that athleticism on display, I mean, if you think about all the other dunks we saw, I mean, was there anybody else that you really saw that really did anything better than him? We can talk about Jericho Sims and how bad his stuff was, but outside of that, back, I mean, jumping over two people, like he's 6'2", I believe. Hey, yeah. Hitting it off the backboard.
He's just an inch taller than me.
See, that,
and I can't dunk.
Exactly. So, I mean,
don't forget it. He did a great job.
I'm glad you're happy for him.
Yeah, I'm happy for him as well. He brought the creativity. He brought the thought process. He didn't miss. He was on point. His double pump from the knees up to slam it home was something that if the late great Kobe Bryant was around, he would just be lit up in his chair, sitting with his legs kicked out underneath him, because it was just absolute on display talent by McClung. And a guy that, again, brought up by the G League. He deserved it. Every single ounce of respect goes to Mr. McClung, to say the least. We're going to segue over, but before I do that, I wanted to introduce our newest sponsor. Only so many Saturdays. You got to make them count. Greatest tagline in the history of college football. 12 Saturdays, 12 games in one season. Just one season. But you got to make them count to get to the Natty. Check out SaturdaysCount.com. That's SaturdaysCount.com. Let's move over to a team closer and nearer, and maybe not so dear to my heart, because I left my bricks outside and my bucket of concrete down the street. And I say that with all due respect to Russell Westbrook, but this move in the same arena, no less, Russell Westbrook is who he thought he was. And I say that because the Clippers had traded off Eric Gordon, Bones Highland. Instead of adding a true point guard, they said, let's bring in Russell Westbrook. Didn't work out with LeBron. Didn't work out with Anthony Davis. And overall, I thought it was a bad fit in LA from the word go. Now, before the season ever started, I had actually made a mention to a Laker follower of mine, and I had said that maybe they ought to think about getting their double ARP cards if this continual lineup seems to just rattle the feathers of fans, and it seems to do just that. I'm not a fan of the older players on one team. This isn't a failed experiment, and we've seen the big three. We've seen it in Brooklyn. That was failed by Kyrie Irving. And now you see, Kevin Durant playing for the Suns in a massive trade deal, probably the largest in recent memory. But those guys fit in those respective places. Kyrie goes on to play for Dallas, who needs a guy who just adds a little something, some perimeter shooting. He's a solid defender, already an NBA champ. Kevin Durant, multiple-time All-Star, who brings so much to that team, waiting for him to get back onto the court to make his presence known with every bounce of the ball. I'm always concerned about his health, though. That's another time for another show. But what do you make of this? Russell Westbrook not working in one LA team and going over, because clearly there were some notable comments by Marcus Morris Sr. about why. this works in the Clippers market, but doesn't work in LA in Lakers market.
You know, as much as we clown Russ and talk about Russ and everything like that, he still has a lot of respect from players in the league. They know what he is. People say we disrespect him, but he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest players, I guess, in some people's eyes to play the game and triple doubles and everything like that. And I think they look at that and I think every team always views a guy and thinks, oh, he can work here. We have the necessary people here to make it work. You know, they have Ty Lue. He's dealt with LeBron. Why can't he do it, Russ? You know, people say LeBron's the biggest drama queen alive, so he can deal with Russ. You got Paul George. Russ and Paul are very close. They played together at OKC. They actually had a really good season together while in OKC. Morris has always had respect for him. You know, I mean, Morris got that dog in him. He said Russ got dog in him too. Why would I not want another dog on the team? So I think the Clippers are just looking at it like we feel like the way we're going to use Russ and the way he's going to play for us will work. We feel like that because here's the thing: he may start, but it doesn't mean he go play 35 plus minutes because you still got a guy named Terrence Mann on that roster who was the starter. It really played well after they traded Bones Highland and Reggie Jackson, so he's definitely still going to get a lot of minutes. Even though I don't know if he's going to be the happiest about it. And listen, I guess we won't know till All-Star break returns if Russell is actually starting, but we know going into those negotiations that was one of his demands. But I think the entire team just feels like Russ will buy in to what they want to do. He's more welcome. He's more loved. You know, he's more accepted. And they think that, listen, he can still get you rebounds. He can still play a little bit of defense. You know, when he's not turning the ball over, he can find the open guy. And so they feel like, hey, that might work for us. And we think that they feel like him himself cannot make us implode. Like the Lakers, we've always said for years, were never a very well-constructed team. It kind of was dependent on Russ, LeBron, AD. The Clippers aren't dependent on Russ, so to say. They have a deeper roster and Kawhi and Paul George are the top two players on that team. So just like Russ was number 3 on Lakers, he's number 3 here, but it's not, okay, it's just those 3 guys and just a bunch of guys. They have other guys that can really play well and also execute. So I wonder if they just think the entire group collaboration of things isn't going to end up the same as it did with the other LA team, and they feel like they can use his talents and his skills and think that actually could benefit them going towards a championship success. That's the goal for them. They're a championship contending team in their heads.
Well, the Clippers themselves, this is just a business transaction at the end of the day. Most trades are. It's not a big secret. Everybody knows. But one thing about the Clippers that I know of, they rank almost dead last in pace and fast break points. Okay. You need someone who can push that tempo, push the speed, push the momentum of ball movement up the floor. When you have an open man, you're taking advantage of numbers. If you can push up the tempo like Russell Westbrook knows how to do, that's his bread and butter. Outside of a little D and a little perimeter shooting, maybe once in a while a little mamma jamma, 2-point to keep D on their toes, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the Clippers need. They need that momentum piece, and I think Russell Westbrook brings that to them. Now, in hindsight, being 2020, or maybe even 2022, 2021. He played 52 games last year. Almost 30 minutes. It's not as if he was overworked. I mean, it wasn't a conversation as to whether or not Russell Westbrook is going to be that guy, but he was given an ample amount of opportunity. He didn't even hit 50% field goal percentage. 3-point percentage was hovering around 30%. I mean, it's not as if he is now what he once was. You could have the same conversation about John Wall. John Wall's numbers are relatively similar as well. Similar type of player, similar body style, similar mindset. I think that Russell Westbrook is a better fit for this Clippers team than Wall was. And I hate to say it was a failed experiment, but that's kind of what it was. Now, we're headed out of an all-star break because come Thursday, and NBA is in full swing with a slew of games. Denver, Cleveland, Boston, Indiana, Detroit, Orlando, Memphis against the 76ers, who are on a tear right now. I must say, New Orleans beating Toronto, I think that will be a W. San Antonio, poorly, will lose against the Dallas Mavericks, crosstown rival, if you will. Oklahoma City takes on the Utah Jazz. The Warriors have their work cut out for them. This season hasn't been nowhere. I'm going to put this on Front Street. I don't think the Golden State Warriors are going to make the buy-in to play. I just don't. They didn't do enough for free agency. They didn't relinquish 3 players that they needed to on that roster to make anything relevant. I think the Lakers, the new look Lakers, post All-Star, look like the team to beat, at least from a team that's out of the top 10 within that respective area. Portland will take on Sacramento. Sacramento's always a hit and miss team. We don't know what team is going to show up. But one highlight for Sacramento is that De'Aaron Fox was an all-star, and deservedly so, I must say. Portland, and I said this during the all-star game, I said, you know what? If Dame doesn't find his way out of Portland, he will never win an NBA championship. And I think his time is running out in Portland. I really do. And players don't enter the NBA because they're going to lose, because they want to lose. Just like teams who play in the NFL aren't going to be on the field and expecting to lose on that day. They're expecting to win and work hard at winning and how to win. And I just don't see the Portland Trailblazers doing anything relative this year. And I see Dame just getting out of that situation. I don't believe there's a big deal on the table for Dame at all. But I think that there's a risk when you acquire Russell Westbrook and you release John Wall. I call it at par, to be quite frank. What are your thoughts about this move? Does it make the Clippers a better team? Are they a better transition team? What areas can the Clippers expect to get when Westbrook is on the floor?
Well, I think you mentioned it at the start when you brought this up, is pace. Russ is very go, 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 go. And I think, you want to be able to get out and fast break, get transition buckets, spread the floor. And they really weren't able to do that before. They were kind of a slow team, because some teams, you have to think about the personnel. Are you a team that is meant to be slow? Are you a team that could be faster or more fast paced? You can maybe say the Clippers could potentially be both. And they just haven't been able to do the actual transition fast break part of it. So you haven't really seen it. And I think Russ will help with that a lot. I think that's really the big they just want to be able to do is just push, go, go, go. And maybe that can help open up shots for Paul George on fast break. Maybe Kawhi, maybe Terrence Mann, maybe Morris, different guys that could maybe, get, open lanes, fast break dunks. And like I said, we do the 3-point shot a lot now in the transition game in today's NBA as well. So I think that's one thing they really wanted from Russ, because John, at this point in his career, he used to be the fastest player in the league. He's still quick, but he's not what he used to be. Terrence Mann is not a pass first point guard. He's a score first guy. So they feel like Russ gives them the best chance to kind of be able to push the pace, still very quick, but also can read a defense and find the open guy if someone's available.
Well, again, it's all about tempo. If that can be found and the numbers are there, I expect Russell Westbrook to be the willing passer if a shot is not clear and a clear path for him to either drive the bucket or hit a perimeter shot, whether it's a game winner or if it's in transition. One thing, and I'll kind of leave everyone with this, is that Marcus Morris went on record saying that in LA, you have 2 teams. The one that's doted on in context, that's doted on, and the other one not so much. Clearly, I know what he's referring to. I know what team is referring to, obviously, in the Lakers, because they were the most storied franchise in the NBA in Los Angeles. I believe they still are. Obviously, they have a lot more championships. They have a lot more swag. They have a lot more followers. They do it in I want to say, kind of a fashioned way that allows for fans to still stay engaged with them despite them losing or not. That's just my take. But one thing about it is that because the spotlight is not on Russell Westbrook, I believe you're going to find a way to make him not only a part of the Clippers transition game, but use him sparingly when you need to, because they don't have that tempo guy. Do I look for Russell Westbrook to be a starter? I'd say probably 70, 80% of the time for the Clippers, maybe. But as we said before the show started, if for some reason this does not work in Los Angeles with the Clippers, this is going to screw up the free agency market. It really will, because that throws everything out of whack. It throws everything out of whack for the Clippers. It throws things out of whack for other players trying to seek, other teams elsewhere to be their landing spots. I just don't know that it either can work or won't work. And I'm going to quote him, and then I'll leave it at that. I mean, no knock on the Lakers, and his fit there. Obviously, LeBron can shoot the S out of it. George said those guys obviously can shoot with the Lakers as well, but I think we're a little younger. And they are a little bit younger. But what the Lakers got back in return to be the new look Lakers isn't obviously part of this conversation. We can run with him. That's kind of our game, space on the floor. I think that's what we can complement him with. We got a bunch of guys that fit that style of play. And they do. They certainly have a run in them to make it at least past the buy-in. And I think Clippers will pass the buy-in. I think the Lakers may squeak in, or maybe on the outside looking in, with less than 23 games left for this regular season. So the Clippers, hats off to them. Hopefully this will work. I guess last but not least, do you think it will, or do you think this is going to be an epic fail on the part of the Clippers? Not that they have millions and millions of dollars invested in Russell Westbrook, nor do they need to.
It's gonna be tough to tell. I think anything short of a championship, from what the organization says, is a failure. So they don't make it there, they're gonna feel like it's a failure, I think. Obviously, we have to see the health of Kawhi and Paul George and those guys, because they've had some injury issues and they have to stay healthy as too, because there's so many things that could impact it. But I feel like if they don't make the championship, or maybe an epic Western Conference Finals, they may feel like, hey, we tried it. I don't see Russell past this season staying with them. I feel like this is truly we got you here to help us make that run, and then we'll reevaluate this offseason, to me.
Right. No, I'm with you. I'm with you there. We're going to see how this plays out. Hopefully it works in the Clippers' favor. And if it doesn't, we're going to have to find out what free agency looks like now that the season will be in the rearview mirror at that point. Bryce, appreciate it. Bryce Lewis, make sure you go follow this guy. He is not only entertaining, but he knows his stuff. That's at BRICEY_2K. So make sure you throw him a follow. Check out this show, which is live on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all across the metaverse, if you will. You can find all of it on TheRudeDogShow.com. So how's that? Thanks, Bryce. I appreciate your time, man. Have a great evening.
Man. You too, man. I'm glad to be on.
Well, we're going to bring you back.
Yes, sir.
Good sign. Good sign.
All right, man. That's what I like to see.
All right, man. Lots of NBA. We're going to follow up with Bryce sometime later on in the week, and we'll find out what the post All-Star looks like. So stay tuned for that one. Thanks, Bryce. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Definitely.
Thanks, man. Take care. So, you heard it from Bryce. If it's happening, Bryce knows what's going on, and he knows what's up with it. This is Rudy Reyes of TheRudeDogShow.com. Like I said in the onset of the show, you never know what you're going to get. But more importantly, 12 Saturdays, 12 games, all in one season. You got to make them count, and you got to go to the Natty if you're making them count. So make this count. Go to SaturdaysCount.com. That's www.SaturdaysCount.com. You can find all types of good stuff. Shirts in your favorite colors, styles, sizes. You can find it all there. So check it out. This is Rudy Reyes on The Rude Dog Show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow.